Hello, and welcome to another episode of Global Desi Women, where we celebrate voices and stories of remarkable Desi women from around the world. I'm your host, Arti Solanki, a business coach, real estate broker, and your Desi podcaster. And along with me, I have my fabulous young co host, Rhea Palicha, a social media strategist, and she absolutely loves reading book. I honestly can't keep up with her. So we'll talk about that later. But today I am beyond thrilled to welcome someone whose storytelling has captivated readers across the globe. Alka Joshi, a New York Times bestseller author of The Henna Artist, The Secret Keeper of the Jaipur, and now beautifully layered new novel, 6 Days in Bombay. We'll dive into the emotions and the inspiration and the unspoken truth about the work that she's put in the 6 days of this intensifying, I would say, just marvelously put together book because it has the I feel like it has so much of women can learn from. So I have absolutely loved that book and I can't wait for Alka to talk about it. So grab your cup of chai and let's get started. Alka, welcome to Global Desi Women. I am absolutely honored to have you on our show.
Well, thank you. I am excited to be here, Arti.
Thank you. Thank you. So before we get into the Q&As, because I know we have a lot of questions that have come across from our audience, from our book club. So before we get into that, tell us all about 6 days in Bombay, how it started and how the work you've put into it. I would love to hear that.
When I was researching the henna artist, and that was a very long process for me, but just because it was my debut novel and I was learning how to write and making mistakes and having to revise and revise and revise. But as I was doing my research, one of the things I did was go to the National Gallery of Art in Bombay, excuse me, in Delhi. And one of the things that I love to do is to go to art galleries and museums because my BA is in art history and I studied a lot of art all over the world. And so I'm always curious to know what some other nation has to offer for their art. So I ran across all those paintings by Amrita Sher-Gill who sit I think there's about 17 of them hanging in the National Gallery. And I thought, God, these are amazing. What is it about this woman that doesn't make her a global phenomena? This is, it's incredible that she was doing this kind of work back in the 1930s. It's a combination, her work is a combination of avant garde, impressionism, and a little bit of surrealism. And so I thought, I have to know something about this gal. So I start researching
Mhm.
more and more about her. And I find out that I think had she lived beyond the age of 28, she died so prematurely. Had she lived beyond the age of 28, I think that we would know her name as well as we know some of the other global artists, female artists. We know, for example, Frida Kahlo. We know Georgia O'Keeffe. We know Mary Cassatt. And I just think that it's important for us to, as women, be able to promote other women throughout history who made an impression, who were living a life of their own choosing, so that we can show everyone around the world that, the equality for women isn't just something we dreamed up, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, that women have been fighting for their destiny, fighting for their ability to stand up for themselves for many, many more years than that. So if we find an example, a real life example of a woman, I think we owe it to the world to sort of, talk about them. So
Yeah.
that right then and there, I decided, okay, I'm going to do a book on Amrita Sher-Gill, but I'm going to make it fictionalized because I'm not a biographer. That would take years and years of, very extensive research. So
Right.
I thought I'm going to fictionalize her life. And then I thought, what part of her life could I fictionalize that would be interesting to me? Well, her death has never been explained. So this young, vibrant woman shows up in a hospital in Lahore in 1941. Her husband brings her in. He leaves her there. within 2 days, she slips into a coma and she dies. So the speculation has always been, oh, well, maybe she had a miscarriage and it turned into sepsis. Okay, then why wasn't something done about it? Oh, maybe it's some misdiagnosed ailment. Well, okay, but then why wasn't it diagnosed? She's a wealthy woman. She comes from a wealthy family. She would have had access to the greatest medical care there would have been. And then also another speculation was that perhaps she had a an abortion that didn't take. Now, that is far more believable because Rita was a great seductress and she did sleep with everything that moved. So that included men, it included women, it included young men, older men. She really, didn't care. She was going to just live life and have this great adventure of life as she saw fit. Even though she came from this aristocratic family, her father was a wealthy Indian Sikh and came from a family where he wasn't required to work. And then her mother was a Hungarian opera singer. So she was, led to believe that, she would probably have to get married within that aristocratic society. And she's like, I'm not having any of that. I'm just going to experiment. I'm going to do whatever it is that I want to do in my life. And I just found her so charming. I found this attitude so charming back in the 90s when certainly no Asian woman is allowed to be that way. There were some European women who lived their life like that, but they had been raised with very different sets of values. And so I just thought, what if I were to fictionalize some answer about that death? Could I explore enough through the storyline, through the characters, through the people that she might have known back then, could I somehow come up with an answer to why this young painter died? And so that became 6 Days in Bombay. That's how the whole thing came about.
And it is like you said, like it kind of like that's what attracted me because honestly, empowering women and your stories always have a strong female character. And I absolutely love that. And that brings me to a question is like, how do you build such a strong, complex female characters as your novels? Because especially this one, right? So how do you come up with those?
I don't even think that I have to come up with them. I think that what I'm always trying to do is to inject real life into all of my female characters. And in real life, we are very complex. Sometimes we don't know why we do something the way that we do it. Sometimes we don't know why we're attracted to a certain person the way that we are. Sometimes we have no idea why other people in our lives are reacting to us in a certain way. And maybe it's something that we are, putting out there that we don't even recognize. So we are complex. We are good. We are bad. We are evil. We are, generous. We are kind. We are triumphant. We are also defeatist. We have all these things within us. And so I can't even help but write characters who somehow embody the whole three dimensionality of us.
Wow, that's so fantastic. And as a woman writing about women, it takes, I guess, like you said, we are so complex. And to balance that in your characters, do you find it easy or do you find it a little bit difficult? Because it's like you have to, show their strength at the same time they're vulnerable. It's how do you balance those characters?
I think largely for your protagonist, you want somebody whom the reader can empathize with. And that empathy might translate to the goodness in that person. So you want to, of course, make sure that the reader can see the goodness in that person. So in 6 Days in Bombay, we have Sona, who is a Anglo-Indian nurse in the 1930s. And she is very young. She's only 26 years old. And she has had a hard life. We know that we already sympathize with her because she has never had a father figure in her life. We sympathize with her because she is responsible for making sure that her mother is taken care of, that her mother is taking her heart medicine, that her mother is eating. And, she feels a lot of responsibility, familial responsibility. And we know that she's a very good nurse because she tries to treat all of her patients as people instead of as somebody that she needs to just look after for the tenure that she has there every day. So now we know that she is essentially a good person. But then we also see that she has this side of her which she is resenting. She's resenting her mother for having let go of a father whom she never really knew. How in the world did that happen? Then she is resenting, some of the choices that her mother is wanting her to make, like, why don't you marry this nice man at work? He's a maintenance man at the hospital. And she's like, I would think that you would want better for me than a maintenance man because that's all he is ever going to want to be. He feels like he's already reached the pinnacle of his ability. But like, how could you think that I have not reached the pinnacle of my ability? Like, I'm still wanting more. I'm still wanting to do more and to be more than that. So we know that there are some, things that she has within her. There's a resentment of her mother. There's a resentment of the fact that she doesn't have a whole family like a lot of other people do. There is the idea that, people who are looking down on her because she doesn't have a whole family and looking at her as a half and a half person because she's half Indian and half British at a time when the British are losing a lot of favor and Indians are looking at the Quit India movement as a done deal. Like they are, this time we are determined that the British are going to leave. It's been 300 years since they've been here and we are tired of it. So they really do need to leave now. So everyone is looking at Sona, our nurse, a little suspiciously. The people who are Indian are looking at her like, which side is she on? The British look at her as if she is less than them because they are 100% British and she's only 50% British. So now we sort of are beginning to see the cracks in this facade of hers and see that she has vulnerabilities and that she has some weaknesses and things in her life are not fabulous all the way around. So that is something that, just comes naturally, I think, to me because I feel that whenever I see somebody who is fabulous, I know that ultimately when I get to know them, there are going to be cracks in that facade and I'm going to see them for the real person that they are because none of us are perfect.
No, no, that's so true. And I mean, I like the character Sona so much because like she's so sweet and caring and trying to break free from all her, I guess, her mom pulling her back all the time, like, like kind of constrained, but then now she's like free and she wants to do things and go places. And I felt so sorry when her money was stolen. I was so sad about that.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know where that character, Agnes, came from, right? So Sona is on the Orient Express. She's going from Istanbul to Prague.
Yeah,
And the first trip she's ever taken by herself, the first trip on this fancy train she's ever taken, she's
yeah,
in Europe for the first time in her life. And she meets up with a woman in her compartment who seems so sophisticated. Once again, the facade is perfect. She has
yeah.
beautiful clothes on. Agnes is, smoking in a way that, says, I'm a sophisticated woman of the 1930s. And yes, I am my own woman and yeah, I smoke whether people want me to or not. And so Sona is looking at her like, oh my gosh, she's so perfect. And then they dress for dinner. They go down to the dining hall, the dining car. And then little by little, I see that Sona is hiding something. And then when she asks, no, excuse me, Agnes is hiding something.
Yeah.
So when she asks Sona to look up at the Accra above and say, "Okay, so what do you see as far as my luggage goes?" And that is when Sona is kind of confused, like, "Oh, she told me her name is Agnes, but there's no A as an initial, gold initial on that luggage." And at that time, I had been researching what luggage of the 1930s would look like because I go into that granular detail. And I found all of these pieces of luggage, and they all had little gold initials on them because that's how experienced travelers traveled in those
Oh,
days.
that
And it was also a mark of somebody saying, I have arrived. I do this all the time. And so, yes, I have luggage with my initials on it. So Agnes is one of those people.
The details in the book just blew me away. Like, seriously, like you said, the initials in there, and every city, the details were so fabulous. Now, my question is, why did you pick Bombay?
It's interesting. I think of Bombay as, of course, a much bigger and livelier New York.
Yeah,
And I think that people who have never been don't realize how large Bombay is and how cosmopolitan it is. And everywhere you look, you can see the combination of tradition plus modernity. And I think that that is so fascinating about Bombay. It's also where Hollywood basically is, right? So Bollywood is all over Bombay. So you have the glamorous, the glitterati are all in Bombay. I just find it, fascinating. And so I thought, okay, well, why don't I base it there? And then we'll call it Bombay the way that it used to be called
yeah,
before they changed it to Mumbai, I think in 1996 or something. And I grew up in India calling it Bombay. So I
yeah.
had the hardest time when people here in America would start saying Mumbai, Mumbai. And I was thinking, what are they talking about? What city are they talking about?
Yeah, I still have the habit of saying it Bombay because I guess, like you said, we grew up saying it Bombay, so I still call it Bombay. I
Yeah.
can't change that.
And Bombay was so cosmopolitan back in the 90s also. Did you know that at the Taj Mahal Hotel, which was, one of the more glamorous hotels you could ever go to in the 1920s and 30s, they hired these African American jazz bands to come and play every night. And so those African American jazz bands would be brought over from America, and they would have like maybe a month stint over at the Taj Mahal Hotel, and people would be dressed in these beautiful gowns from the 90s and, Indians and expats alike and the Britishers and so on. And they would all be dancing to jazz music back then. So it's very, drinking martinis and gin fizzes and lime rickeys. I love that whole era. I don't know
Yeah.
if you guys have a fascination with that era, but I kind of have a fascination with it. So it was really fun for me to do all of that exploration.
I just learned about that era reading the book because I had no idea what Bombay was at that time, right? And it was like, wow, interesting, And that's one of the things that fascinates me. Like I said before, every place you have gone back to that era and described it such wonderfully. And I want to know how do you do all that work? How do you is it just online research or how do you come up with such wonderful details?
Okay, so you know that before I started writing at all, I didn't start writing until my fees, but before I started writing, I ran my own advertising and marketing agency. So what that meant was for, every single month, every single period of time, I was managing about 5 to 6 projects. I, of course, went to make pitches to clients. I was in project meetings with my freelancers. I was constantly presenting. I was used to doing a lot of different kinds of things. And one of the things I never shied away from because I had to do research for my projects in order to say, yes, I understand your product. Yes, I understand the market that you are in. I would always call people up. I had no shyness about calling people up and saying, hey, can you teach me a little bit about, the Sun Microsystems, Spark stations or whatever, right? And people were always so generous and happy to help out because if somebody has an expertise, the first thing they want to do is talk to somebody about it, right? So when I became an author, it was really easy for me to just call people up and say, hey, I'm going to be in Prague. I would like to talk to you because you are an interwar expert. Or I found, art historian in Boston, and they knew all about what was happening in Paris at the time in 1937, which is when 6 Days in Bombay is set. And I said, can you tell me about anybody I can go talk to in France? In Paris and tell me if they are an expert in the same thing that you're an expert in, because I'd like to walk around the city with them. So this is what I did before I went to Europe to explore in all these different places. So of course I'd been to Bombay before and I had met with various people before about the history of Bombay. Then I went to Istanbul and did the same thing. And then I went to Prague and Paris and Florence and London. So, for example, in Prague, I had found through a series of connections, I found a woman who teaches at the Czech Academy of Sciences. So she knows about science. She's probably on the spectrum a little bit because she is so filled with information that she can just, spew it out. But she also just seemed to know a lot about the history of Prague. And she was so delighted to share it with me. So she walked me around the old town and the new town. And I said, where would my protagonist have gone to find this lover of Mira, our painter who had died? Where am I going to find, where would she go to find this kind of information? So Martina actually walked me around everywhere. And she said, now this is a building that your painter might have lived in because this is the kind of residence that her family would have lived in, and they would have owned the entire building. They would have owned every floor. And your painter would probably have slept on the fourth floor, which would be the attic, because if she's a painter, they want her all the way up there with all of her painting supplies, and they don't care if the floor gets dirty up there. Right. And she also took me to the cafe which still exists, where in the all the painters used to hang out there, and the signature dish or the signature drink of that cafe is this very rich hot chocolate with whipped. So I said, "Okay, Martina, let's have that." So we had hot chocolate with whipped cream, and so of course, as you know, that made it into the book.
Look, yeah.
In Florence, I was met with an art historian who teaches at the University of Milan. He took the train down to Florence to meet with me, and he walked me around all over Florence to say, this is the Accademia where the actual Amrita Shergill studied. And so we'll walk through that. And then he took me all the way to the Via Tornabuoni, which is where all the expats lived, because now in Florence, I'll be looking for Paolo, whom the painter used to have as a lover. And so I thought Paolo is probably going to hang out with all the expats in this area. So maybe this is where I'm going to be able to find him. Then I went across the Arno with her and I walked through some of the streets across the Arno, which are not as well heeled as the Via Tornabuoni. And so I was able to see, find a building where I thought, I think this is where Paolo is going to teach a tutor painting to young students here. So that's how I actually do my research. I want my reader to smell and hear and taste wherever it is that the protagonist is going, as if you're walking lockstep with them. And so I walk lockstep with my protagonist as I do my research.
And it shows in the book. It absolutely shows in the book. Like I said, it takes you to each place so well. And it's amazing how the journey. And the funny part is that even I was listening to the book on my audiobook on the way we were going, and my husband was listening to it, and he's really not a reader, and he was listening to just bits and clips of this book, and he was like, who's this? He's getting so worked up. He constantly I couldn't even listen to the book. I'm like, can you not ask me the questions?
That is so funny. I am so lucky with Sneha Mathan, who is my narrator. And, long ago when I was when they were first publishing The Henna Artist, my contract, of course, for every book has an audiobook attached to it. And so Harper Audio sent me 4 or 5 different actresses who were going to narrate the film. They're reading all the same passage, and so I got a chance to hear them and say, "Okay, I think this actress is the one." But I heard nobody who sounded like Lakshmi. Lakshmi is narrating that book, and I thought, "I'm not hearing Lakshmi here." So I said to Harper Audio, well, actually, I didn't say anything to them for a while because I thought, this is my debut novel. I have never written before. I am not going to let them think I'm a diva and that I'm going to come back to them and say, well, this isn't right for me. And so I thought, well, why don't I, take the responsibility of finding the right narrator? So I went to Audible and I listened to the first 5 minutes for free of every book that had been written by Indians. And I found Sneha. And I thought, "That voice, that is Lakshmi right there. I have to have that voice." So then I went back to Harper Audio and I said, "Would you please ask Sneha to read the same passage that everyone else did?" And sure enough, they did. They sent me the MP4 file and she was perfect. So ever since then, I've had them hire her for every single book that I write.
She did a very good job. Very
Yeah.
good job.
She has the
Excellent.
ability to act.
Yeah.
Actually, and a narrator can't just read. This is why they don't have most authors read their work because we're not actors and actresses naturally, but she actually knows how to act as well as read the book, so it's
Yeah.
fabulous.
There was a lot of emotion in her sound. And so that kind of like really gets, really get connected to the book, you know? And that's the main thing when you're listening books rather than reading, you want to get connected. Otherwise, there are books, like you said, some narrators, the book may be good, but then you don't get that connection and you kind of lose that. So I'm glad you found the perfect match for your books because she's doing phenomenal job. She's
Well,
doing
I would
amazing.
I would say to every aspiring author out there, or even if you've already had a book published and had an audiobook done, take the responsibility of finding exactly the narrators that you want for your book. It doesn't take that long. And once you find the right person, they will actually help sell your book like crazy. Like Sneha, took us to the best audiobook list as well when The Henna Artist was becoming a bestseller on the New York Times. She was making the audiobook a bestseller on the audiobook lists everywhere.
It makes a difference. I've noticed too on Audible when I want to read a book and then I listen to maybe the first, like the preview or the sample. It, I mean, if I'm not engaged or I don't know, I just don't connect with the voice immediately, it's like, nope, I'll
Yeah.
get the physical copy.
Yes.
I've done that plenty of times. I've actually downloaded the books because I've heard good reviews, but then when I hear it, I give it a try and it just doesn't click. And I'm like, oh no, I can't do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think Ria has been reading which one? The henna or artist or
And the artist. I haven't started the other one that is also on my list. More of like a general question too, with all of your books taking place in parts of India and also different parts of the world. For folks that who are not part of the South Asian culture too, like I guess what do you hope for readers to connect with when it comes to the Indian culture?
Well, I think this is a really excellent question because it is one of my goals in even writing these books that people will understand India as a whole country, not just the bits and pieces that they may have been exposed to in a school textbook or in a movie they saw or the Bollywood movies that they see now. I want people to understand India and her people and how complex it is, and also how rich that heritage is and for how many centuries it's been around. That is, a far greater sort of history than the United States, which has only been here for 350 years. Even Europe has not been around as long as India has. So I think it's important for us to respect the history and all of the many different iterations that India has survived. And also, I think that for me, this was a very personal quest because when I was first came with my family to the United States in 1967, we landed in Ames, Iowa. My father was getting his doctorate at the Iowa State University. And in Iowa, there were just not a lot of brown people. In Iowa, people had never been outside of the state. Many of them were farmers or farming adjacent kind of people. They'd never been outside of the country, never even had any desire to go outside the country. So, whatever they knew of India, if we would tell them we were from India, they would sort of misinterpret what we were saying. So they might say, India, isn't that somewhere near Texas? I think I've been there. Or they would say, you're Indian, so what tribe are you from? Or they would say something like, "Why do you guys let those cows run through the streets? We don't do that here. Cows belong on a farm." And then they would say things that really kind of hurt our feelings, my brothers and I. And that was to say, India is a third world country. It is an underdeveloped country. Are you guys lazy or something? Is there something wrong with Indians? Why can't you guys get your act together? And why is the country so poor? Why don't you take care of your poverty? Why don't you feed people? And as a 9-year-old kid, I was really kind of shocked by this assessment of India, and a very negative assessment of India because as a kid, you just accept wherever it is you grow up. You like it, you have your friends, you have your family, you like the food. You don't really think about having to defend where you're from. And all of a sudden, I found myself thinking, well, either I have to defend where I'm from and I don't know enough to defend it, or I am just going to pretend I'm not from India. I'm just American. Okay, so anybody asking me questions about India, I don't know enough about it. I'm just an American, everybody, just like you. And kids always want to fit in. That's all we want to do.
Yeah.
So I just remember thinking at the time that I am ashamed of where I'm from. I'm embarrassed about where I'm from. And so for years and years, I did not go back to India. For years and years, for 4 decades, I never went back. I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to have anything to do with India. And then in my 50s was when I started going back with my mother because my younger brother had bought a condo there, which kind of surprised the hell out of all of us, but he wasn't living there. He was actually working and living in Shanghai. But he said, look, you guys, I think if we want to, sort of get back to our roots, here's this flat that I have bought and it's all decorated and everything. And you guys can come stay anytime you want. So my mother really wanted to go because she was in her 70s, but she needed a chaperone. So she said, Elka, will you please come with me? And I said, sure. And so at the same time that that was happening, I was experiencing the recession here in the United States. It was actually a global recession in 2008. And so my business and my ad agency was down. And so I had all this time on my hands and I thought, what am I going to do until this recession abates? Well, maybe I'll do what my husband has always thought I could do, which is to write fiction about India. He always loved the stories I told him about India. And he said, you should write those out. I think you could really sell these kinds of things. So I enrolled in a master's of fine arts program in creative writing. And so at the same time that I was having breaks in my winter program, my summer break, my spring break, and all the holidays in between, my mother was asking me to take her to India. So now I'm going back for the first time in all these decades, and I am seeing India through my mother's eyes. My mother loved everything about India. She never wanted to leave. It was all my father's dream, to go to America, not hers. And so she took me to the sari bazaars and we would shop for saris. She took me to the jewelry bazaars and we would look at all the jewelry there. And she took me into the back room where, the proprietor will take you to show you the really good jewelry for the wedding instead of just the touristy jewelry. So I even found a way to incorporate that into the second novel, The Secret Keeper of Jaipur, which is all about a man named Motilal, the jeweler. And then mom also took me to those vegetable bazaars and fruit. She said, my favorite fruit is bael, and we can't get that in the United States. So she hadn't tasted it in years. And so, as we are also doing this, becoming reacquainted with India, my mother is telling me about her life as a young girl. And I didn't realize that when she was 18, she had really wanted to continue with school. She wanted to go to college. But of course, her father said, no, 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 we have arranged a marriage for you. You need to get married to this man right here. And we have done the charts, the astrological charts. It's all going to work out. My father was a young, ambitious engineer at the time, newly minted. He heard the call of Nehru, who said, we need engineers to rebuild India's infrastructure. So my dad became an engineer, and now he is running a lot of new construction projects, roads, dams, and bridges in Rajasthan. So my mom and dad get married, and within 4 years, my mother has 3 kids. And her life is just not her own. She doesn't get to go back to school. She doesn't get to have a career. And I think that she would love to have had both. She really would have loved to have a degree. And I think that she was a very natural businesswoman. I think she could have had a business of her own, but it just wasn't, in her cards. So she made sure that, and she's telling me this as we are in India. She said, honey, I have fought with your dad all these years to make sure that you could have the life that I never had. So, whatever it is you wanted to do with your life, we allowed you to do. And we knew you were creative. We just always made sure that you knew you're going to have to find some way to support yourself. So, you want to be an artist? Great. Find a job that can support you, that can pay your bills, pay your mortgage, and so on. And she said, you know, your dad didn't want you to study that year in Italy, but I knew you really wanted to, so I fought with him on that. I said, when is she gonna get this opportunity again? So I had a chance to go to Florence and study there for a year with my Stanford program. And then also she said, we're just gonna let her marry whomever she wants. And I think my mother knew that I wasn't particularly interested in having children. So she didn't want to force me to decide early on to get married, even though my father was always throwing young men my way. Like, "Oh, here's a doctor, here's an engineer, here's somebody you might be interested in." I was like, "No, dad, please, I just wanna do my own thing right now." And so I didn't get married until I was 36 years old, and by then I did find somebody who respects women, who, you know, really felt that I could just be anything I wanted to be. I could do anything I wanted to do, and by then, I already had a career established in advertising and marketing, so, you know, I felt like it was the right time. And so I thought, wow, my mother worked so hard to make sure that I could have this independent life. I can make sure that she could have an independent life too, but I can only do that in fiction. So now that I'm learning to write, why don't I create a character like Lakshmi in The Henna Artist who gets to do all the things my mother didn't get to do? So Lakshmi keeps herself child free. So then I had to do all this research on how women would keep themselves child free in India in the 90s and 50s. And she has to then decide that maybe the marriage is not serving her. So she's going to leave her marriage in order to find independence. So after 2 years, Lakshmi leaves her marriage and then she forges this life for herself, doing the two things that I think my mother could have done in the 1950s, which is to be a Mehndi artist and also to, you know, be an herbal healer. Because I know that, you know, my family, as all of our families do, we all have these recipes that get handed down for indigestion or maybe for better skin or, you know, whatever it is that ails us. And I
Yeah,
thought,
we at least have one family member that knows everything about all the herbs and spices. Every Desi family has one person. I know I have my sister who's like any aches, pains, we call her like, okay, what do we do now? And she'll be like, yeah, take this and do this.
right,
Is the
right.
for everything.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And my dad, you know, who is now 94 years old, still drinks his hot milk with turmeric every night with a little bit of Splenda, because he has to have a little bit of the sugar in it, and, you know, so I just thought, "Okay, this is now what I'm going to write about." I didn't know that I was gonna write about this when I first started my MFA program, but in the end, it turned out to be The Henna Artist was my thesis, and that was a very early version of that, and so that's sort of how the whole thing got started. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and it just came
Yeah.
so naturally to you, right? It's just like it is like, a lot of people ask like, "Oh, do you put your life experiences in the book?" And it sounds like yes, because that's what you want to see women, how you portray women in your books and how your mom wanted you to flourish.
Yes,
And
yes.
so that what it comes so naturally in your books.
Yes. You know, the whole idea of women's gold and how, you know, in India, the wedding jewelry, that dowry is really meant to sustain women through a hard time, you know, either in retirement or maybe if their husband dies and they become widows and so on. And so this is a real life experience that happened in my family. My mother had her gold that was given to her both by his family and by her family. And she was, of course, hoarding it like, you know, we all do with our gold. And when we came to the United States, we were not allowed to bring all of that gold. So most of it stayed in India. And my grandfather ended up using it to marry off the rest of his daughters. And my mother never forgave that because that was supposed to be hers. And so I found a way to work that into the henna artist as well. You know, because I think it's these kinds of little things that people don't know about us are important, that there is wealth in India. We just don't carry it around with us everywhere, right?
It has the emotional touch in it, right? I mean, like we have so much, it's not just a gold for us. There's so much story behind it. There's an emotion for it. I mean, we pass down that from generations, right? There are a lot of families who has their great grandparents have something made for their wedding, and that's like a symbol of their family, and that's passes down for generations. So it has so much story in it. It's not just a gold piece of gold for
Yeah,
us.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's very different than just the wedding ring, it's a
Yeah.
whole thing that provides a lot of comfort to a woman.
Yeah. So let's get to the questions from our readers and our listeners. So first one here I have is help us understand your thought process behind having Sona at the end do the same thing with her child that she resented her dad and Dr. Stoddart for.
Actually, I think I gave her a better ending than her own life had. So in her life, she didn't have a father. And I think that for her daughter, she definitely wants a father. So when she finds out she's pregnant, she knows that she'll be seeing Edward. She already has feelings for Edward. And she knows that Amit Mishra needs to be left to do his thing that he really wants to do out in the world and contribute to society in the way that he feels is very important. And so she marries Edward instead. And Edward then becomes the father for her child. Her child has not known any other father but Edward. That is her father. And so I felt that what she was doing was giving her child the father that she didn't have. And then Dr. Stoddard, who didn't start out in the book as somebody with such a large role until I got to the point where I'm like, so he's going to go on this journey to Istanbul and he can take Sona with him part of the way to her destination. So he can take her to Istanbul, make sure she's okay, and then she can hop through Europe there. And so he just became like a bigger and bigger and bigger role until I realized, oh, he's the father that Sona never had. He is the one who is like guiding her. He is advising her. He is making sure she has enough money by teaching her all of those, card tricks and ways to make more money, for her journey. And then I realized in the original manuscript that I handed to my agent, she said, okay, so Alka, the thing is that your character of Dr. Stoddard, you have actually killed him off because I had killed him off. By the time Sona got to Florence, she got a telegram saying that Dr. Stoddard was now dead. And so she said, that this is just one too many dead people. You have killed off her mother, you have killed off Dr. Stoddard, you have killed off her original father. And so can you undead some of these people? Because it's gonna seem to the reader as if that they don't have anybody now to look forward to who's still alive. And so I said, okay, I will bring Dr. Stoddard back to life, and I'm so glad I did, because ultimately it is Dr. Stoddard who then goes with her to London and really makes the final push to find her father's family. And I thought, okay, this is the right thing to do. This is fabulous. And then because I undeaded him, he also then gets to be the grandfather to her own child, which I thought was just a lovely conclusion. So actually, in reality, I was giving Sona a lot that she didn't have in her own life by giving her that ending.
Yeah. So the second question we have is I hope this answered our audience's question. And the second question we have is I'm curious as to why you chose the Anglo-Indian community to focus the story on, and how did you research and find out the details of their lives in India?
This is so interesting. I didn't know anything about the Anglo-Indian community, but when I looked at who was working in hospitals in the 90s, it was either English people or Anglo-Indians. They were just starting to train Indian nurses. They were just starting to do that. They wouldn't allow Indian nurses into a private hospital like the one that Sona is working in. And I thought the painter who is sick is going to go to one of these wealthy private hospitals. She's not going to go to a government hospital. And so I had to, in all authenticity, make sure that the nurses taking care of her are those kinds of nurses who were actually working there. And I thought, well, this is kind of fascinating. What if I were to make Sona a half Indian and half European person? And then the woman she's taking care of in the hospital, the painter, is also, just like Amrita was, half Indian and half European. It gave them a chance to bond about something. It also gave Sona the ability to see someone else who is comfortable with their dual identity in a way that she is not. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe this is a way for her to finally understand that she can be both, that she could adopt both of those identities comfortably, and she doesn't necessarily have to choose between them. And so then, also at the end, Edward, the choice of Edward became much more comfortable because he's also Anglo-Indian. And so the two of them have much more in common than she would if she were just with somebody who is 100% Indian or 100% British. Right. So it all kind of worked out that way. And then I did meet along my journey of the perfumist of Paris. This is so interesting how all these things happen. In one of the book clubs in Las Vegas that I was doing, of all places, this beautiful Indian woman, she set up this entire group of her friends in Las Vegas who then came. She had a catered event, and we all talked about the perfumist of Paris. And one of the women there was an Anglo Indian. And I said, can I call you up sometime and ask you about Anglo Indians? I'm going to do my own research, but I would just like to confirm a couple of things with you. And she said, sure. And so I called up Phyllis, and she answered all my I actually said, I said, here's how I'm setting up Sona. Does this ring true for you? Yes. Does this ring true for you? Absolutely. Does this ring true for you? Oh my God, yes. And so there is a part of me that is able to observe and draw my own conclusions based on those observations and on my reading that almost gets me 99% of the way to where I need to be with portraying people.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And now we have the last question. Do you read or recommend books by other Desi authors? And have always wondered how much writers like to read other people's stuff, especially that's very close to your own genre. So,
Okay.
you know,
I do not like to read things that are close because that really, I don't want it to influence what I'm writing about or any of my characters or the plot line. So I don't like to read anything that's super close. And luckily, there's actually nobody writing about just family life in India the way that I do. I think maybe Chitra Divakaruni is probably the closest, but Chitra and I also have differences in the way that we write about families. And I adore Chitra, and she and I are good friends. But and I've read all of her work, but I find that because it's a different flavor than what I write, it doesn't influence my work. I have blurbed a couple of, and you know what blurbing is, right? It's the jacket, it's the nice things that we say about somebody's writing on the jacket cover. I have blurbed several Desi authors that way. And I think that I'm very careful about who I blurb because I want to blurb people whom I think are giving us a side of India we don't normally see, or sort of expanding on our knowledge of India. I don't necessarily want to promote something I don't believe in, or read material and then blurb about it if I don't think that it's furthering a positive agenda about India. I'm just one of those people, just because of my background, feel that there was so little knowledge about India here in the West. And it was important for me to have people understand Indians in all of their glory, in all the goodness, all the badness, all of the contradictions, to write about class and caste the way that it's normally lived in India, not the way that people think about it here in the West. Yes, so I will read and support authors that are also furthering that same kind of agenda.
that's fantastic. And I have my last question. Which book is on your nightstand currently?
So I just started reading Miranda July's All Fours. Miranda July is, that book I think has been talked about all over the New York Times. So I thought, okay, well, maybe I will start reading it. Well, I'm halfway through and I'm actually going to give up because if a book doesn't have characters that I can empathize with, whom I can just say, I want this person in my life, then I won't keep reading the novel. I gave it as many pages as I thought I could give it because there is some beautiful writing in it. She writes about desire and longing in a way that I have not seen, and it's really gorgeous. The writing is just beautiful, but I'm not loving the characters. I just don't care about them. And so I have to give up on that. And I think, I was just talking to somebody at dinner a couple of nights ago, and she's also a writer. And she was saying, Alka, when I read your books, I feel empathy for the characters, like I'm rooting for them. That's what I want to read. When I read somebody else's book, I want to root for the character. Like, yeah, you go, make it, do it, succeed.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And that's what we do. We inspire global Desi women. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And we have so many amazing women in the global Desi culture. We have so many women around the world. This is another reason why I like to incorporate world into the entire world into my novels because we South Asians blend so beautifully with other cultures while keeping our traditions. I think that we have this ability, and I don't know if it's just because we come from this ancient culture, but we have an ability to get along with a lot of different kinds of people. And so through my books, I also want people to understand that Indians do travel and live all over the world and work all over the world and look at them and how they contribute to whatever society they end up being a part of. I do think that we contribute in such a positive way that is not officially recognized or acknowledged around the world, but I'm on a one woman mission to make sure that it gets acknowledged.
Yay! Awesome. Love that. Absolutely. So, Alkaji, thank you so much for gifting us your time and wisdom today. And 6 days in Bombay is not just a story, it's an experience, a journey into identity, memory, and resilience. And for everyone who's listening, I highly, highly tell you if you haven't picked up the book, I encourage you to read it. It's an amazing, fantastic book. All your novels are fantastic, but this has been like one of the things that I couldn't stop listening to. So it was just like very, very, I don't even have the words. Like, I don't want to keep saying that it's empowering and inspiring. It's like the character is just so bold and so wonderfully portrayed that everyone should listen or read to the book. So I highly encourage that. And you can find Alka's books on Amazon and I guess all the other platforms as well, or the bookstores. So you can
Right.
definitely find those. And we'll also put a link in our description so you can grab it from there. And again, Alka, thank you so much for
You're so welcome.
coming. And we wish you continued success and look forward to many, many more stories that we read. Come again with another novel whenever you publish. Come again. We would absolutely love to have you and hear about the book as well.
Arti, let me ask you this: the audiobook that you listened to, was it on Apple or Spotify or Audible?
Audible.
Audible. Okay, because it is on every platform. So whatever platform people listen to, I do think that the audiobook is amazing to listen
It
to.
is.
So
It is.
I hope that people will take that up. And thank you, everybody. You can follow me on all social media. I love social media, so I'm always putting something on there almost every day.
And
And
we will put all that in our podcast description. We'll put your social media links and your website and also the book, Amazon book link. So people, listeners can obviously grab it from there. And until next time, to all our listeners, stay curious, stay courageous, and keep celebrating global Desi women within you. And thank you.
all right, guys. Thank you.